Rhaenyra Targaryen sat at the eye of the storm that was the Dance of the Dragons. She was the eldest surviving child of King Viserys I. She was known as the Realm's Delight, and at the age of 8, she was presented to the great and good of Westeros as her father's heir, Princess of Dragonstone. 20 years later, in the wake of her father's death, Rhaenyra's supporters went to war to put her on the throne. She was the daughter of a king, and eventually the mother of 2 more. She had 6 children, 3 with her uncle Daemon Targaryen, and 3 during her marriage with Rhaenyra Velaryon, son of the legendary Corlys. I say during her marriage because it was widely rumoured that these 3 sons were the product of her affection for Harwin Strong. In this video, I'm going to look at several questions about these children. First, what's the evidence that these were Harwin Strong's children and not Rhaenyra Velaryon's? Assuming they are Harwin's children, why does she hide their parentage? What problems did these lies cause? For herself, for her children, and for the Targaryen dynasty more generally. And lastly, what if she just told the truth? What if she was open and honest about who she made these children with? Would it have changed anything about the Dance of the Dragons? Let's begin with the physical descriptions of Rhaenyra, her first husband, and their 3 legal children. George R.R. Martin writes that Rhaenyra was a pudgy girl and a stout woman. Rhaenyra did have the silver gold hair of the Targaryens. Fire and Blood specifies that Sir Laenor had the aquiline nose, silver white hair, and purple eyes that bespoke his Valyrian blood. So that's the parents, very generically Targaryen. What does the text say about their children? The Maesters, who in Universe wrote the world of Ice and Fire, addressed this question immediately after Laenor's physical description. Why then did Jacaerys have brown hair and eyes and a pug nose? He shared the same physical traits with his 2 younger brothers, Luke and Joffrey. Each one was born healthy and strapping, with the brown hair and pug nose that neither Rhaenyra nor Laenor possessed. Of course, it's perfectly possible for a Targaryen not to have the silver gold hair. There's Baelor Breakspear, son of a Targaryen father and a Martell mother, who had his mother's black hair. And then Jon Snow, son of a Targaryen father, but whose physical appearance is described as typical for a Stark, including the black hair. Could there be a similar explanation for Jace, Luke, and Joffrey? Their grandmother, Laenor's mother, is Rhaenys Targaryen, who also doesn't have the standard Targaryen features. She is, like seemingly all the Baratheons and their illegitimate offspring, black of hair. So that's not an explanation of where Jace and his brothers got their brown hair from. So with this mysterious brown hair, why did rumour point towards Harwin Strong? We know that in 105 AC, 5 members of the Strong family came to live in King's Landing: future Hand of the King Lionel, Harwin, Larys, and 2 of their sisters. In 113 AC, Mushroom, the court jester, allegedly found Rhaenyra and Harwin in bed together, and the following year, at Rhaenyra's wedding, Harwin was her champion in the wedding tournament. Laenor doesn't seem to have been threatened by this. When Rhaenyra bestowed her garter on Sir Harwin, her new husband laughed and threw one of his own to Sir Joffrey. George R.R. Martin loves putting in historical parallels, and I wonder if this tournament with Rhaenyra and Harwin is an echo of the tournament at Harrenhal, where Rhaenyra Targaryen chose Lyanna Stark as the Queen of Love and Beauty, rather than his own wife. Rhaegar and Lyanna would go on to have a child, and perhaps we're meant to assume the same of Harwin and Rhaenyra. Certainly, these 2 seem to be in close physical proximity almost up until Harwin dies at Harrenhal. On the balance of probabilities, it very much seems that these 3 children are indeed Harwin Strongs. So why does she hide their parentage? I think the explanation here lies in Rhaenyra's two role models, her father figures, the men who gave her two different ways of being a Targaryen, and these are two different ways that she failed to integrate. The first one is her father Viserys. Viserys is very Westerosi. There's very much something of the country gentleman about him. When his wife dies in 105 AC, Viserys decides to present the aristocracy with Rhaenyra as his heir. Hundreds of lords did obeisance to the realm's delight as she sat at her father's feet at the base of the Iron Throne, swearing to honour and defend her rights of succession. For the rest of his life, Viserys was uncharacteristically strident about Rhaenyra being his heir. The only time that Viserys wavered in his support for Rhaenyra succeeding him was in 113 AC, when she became an adult and Viserys negotiated her marriage with Rhaenyra Targaryen. The father and daughter argued. Viserys would hear none of it, and against all her objections, he only needed to know that, if she refused the marriage, he would reconsider the succession. Rhaenyra backed down and agreed to do what her father asked. So that is one part of her Targaryen heritage, growing up as heir to the throne and all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The other part, her other model for what a Targaryen should be, was her uncle Daemon. And yes, father figure is kind of an icky phrase, considering their future relationship. At the same time as she was sitting at the base of the Iron Throne, watching her father and learning how to rule the kingdom, she started living a life that would be fine for a prince, but was dangerous for a princess. The Maesters acknowledge that this part of the story is a domestic drama, ultimately unknowable once all the participants have left the stage. And here we must digress to say a word about our sources, for much of what happened in the years that followed happened behind closed doors, in the privacy of stairwells, council rooms, and bedchambers, and the full truth of it will likely never be known. Among the second and third hand accounts, a few patterns emerge. Something happened between Rhaenyra and Criston Cole, but then good relations broke down, and ever after Cole hated the princess. There were suggestions that she was particularly close with Harwin Strong, and finally that Prince Daemon was teaching her how to be a good lover so that she could snare one of the other two men. Perhaps Viserys was aware of all these rumours and hoped that marriage would focus her energies. Marrying a Velaryon was very common, but at the age of 9 and 10, Rhaenor preferred the company of squires his own age, and was said never to have known a woman intimately, nor to have any bastards. Marriage, in this case, provides Rhaenyra with an alibi for having children, rather than a man to have children with. It looks like she found that man before she got married. So I think it makes sense to see Rhaenyra as stuck between two positions, being the heir of the throne, being an ally of the Velaryons, being a Westerosi like Viserys, and on the other hand, being like Daemon, an unrepentant Targaryen who doesn't really care about gender roles, takes what they want when they want it. She tries to do both of these things, and that leads her to lie about her children's parentage. What is the impact of these children who look nothing like a Targaryen? I think it's a massive propaganda victory for the Greens. It helps them appeal to the more traditional Westerosi who might prefer a man on the throne, with Alicent Hightower having produced both an heir and a spare. It puts House Strong in danger, particularly Harwin, who dies in a fire at Harrenhal along with his father. Notable people who might have wanted this to happen include King Viserys, the Sea Snake, Larys Strong, and even Daemon Targaryen. Curiously, Corlys Velaryon seems to have no problem with his brown-haired grandchildren, going on to serve as Hand of the Queen during the Dance of the Dragons. But it does lead to the death of Vaemond, Corlys's younger brother, who tried to become head of House Velaryon by reason of Rhaenyra's children being illegitimate. I know the show gives the reason as dynastic ambition, just having the name being enough for Corlys. But it's kind of odd that George R. Martin hasn't done the usual, here are 3 or 4 possible explanations for his behaviour. Maybe Corlys knows that his bastard grandchildren, Alan and Adam of Hull, exist, and he's fine with them as a backup plan for the future of his family. Maybe he knows that Laenor prefers boys, and he can't really blame Rhaenyra for looking elsewhere. After all, if she remains loyal to Laenor and doesn't stray outside her marriage, a childless Rhaenyra would be a huge target for the Green children once they reach adulthood. So, what if Rhaenyra tells the truth? I think this depends on when she decides to do it, when she decides to embrace being fully Targaryen, accepting Daemon's philosophy on life and deciding to live fully. Let's imagine she tells the truth before she gets married. Whether it's Kristen Cole or Harwin Strong or her uncle Daemon, she announces she's chosen a man and she's going to make babies with him, and anyone who's got a problem with that can have a word with her dragon. I think there's a window of opportunity here for Rhaenyra to steal the throne, or at least to strengthen her position as heir. Whichever man she chooses, Cole, Strong, or Daemon, her uncle backs her up. So as well as Syrax, she can call on the power of Caraxes. In this scenario, maybe Viserys goes ahead and disinherits her. What impact would that have on families like the Starks, who agreed to swear allegiance to Rhaenyra back in 105 AC? I'm not sure it matters, at least in the short term. The Green children are too young at this point to be a factor, so this could remain a family affair. In another historical parallel, this reminds me of the reigns of Castamere. Tytos Lannister sat back and did nothing while his son Tywin went into action, and I think Viserys would be the same. Rhaenyra and Daemon could take the Greens into custody and maybe leave them in prison forever. Perhaps you would need to do the same with Viserys. Take control of the Red Keep, confine him in his chambers, a figurehead for her regime, technically still king, but not allowed to make any decisions. It sounds kind of harsh, but Viserys doesn't really like taking decisions, so part of him would probably be relieved. What would they do with the Greens, with the Hightowers? Would they be prepared to exterminate the Green faction? That would definitely cost them in terms of public relations. It would condemn them in the eyes of the Westerosi for generations. Everyone would say the gods hated them for it. So I'm not sure how that hypothetical would play out once Rhaenyra grabs power for herself. What if she admitted the truth after the children were born, either one child or 2 or all of them? This looks trickier. If she suddenly announces that her children are Harwin Strongs, she's admitting she deceived people, including the Velaryons, who won't be very happy because, at the very least, she's humiliating Laenor. Once she's married and the child exists, she's letting go of the moral high ground by deciding to go full Targaryen. I think Daemon still backs her up, but at this point, the Green children are older, and maybe they offer more resistance. And that for me is the main issue. Whether Rhaenyra lies or not, whether she gets married or not, the Green faction still exist and somehow need to be dealt with. I suppose you could keep them in prison for the rest of their lives. You could take your dragons and you could go and burn down the High Tower in Old Town. But again, that wouldn't be a popular move among many people. So maybe, if Rhaenyra tells the truth, maybe she'd be a happier person. Maybe she'd be more proactive about taking her throne. But I think some version of the Dance of the Dragons still happens. It's about when and not if. But what do you think? Let me know if I've missed anything or if you agree or disagree with any of what's just fallen out of my mouth. Thanks for watching.